It's our pleasure to have two of the staff members of Cal-IPC, which is a very closely related organization to CNPS that we have supported for years because of the good work they do in addressing the problem of invasive plants. And one of the staff persons is Constance Taylor. She's the staff conservation specialist at Cal-IPC. And she has over 15 years in creating community nature programs and doing nature outreach and developing adult-centered environmental education. She grew up in Ohio, as I did, and spent a lot of time in nature as a kid. She has one of the most diverse career patterns I've ever seen, and I think it's just interesting to review it because we have wonderfully interesting people on these programs, and it's nice to know about it. She has a very diverse career. She's been an editor at a comic book publishing company, been a muralist, and a car mechanic, in addition to being an environmentalist. She's worked in extremely interesting places, a trail crew in Appalachia, endangered wallaby breeding program in Australia, a feminist comic book shop in New Zealand, and a lion research project in Mozambique, and finally, a community muralist at a women's shelter in Guatemala. So that's about as diverse a resume as I've ever seen. She noticed that she saw many of the same plants all over the world, and I have to share that. Seeing eucalyptus in Peru and Kenya, and a variety of invasive plants around the world, and became fascinated with invasives and how to control them. And since 2010, she's worked with a number of environmental organizations around the Bay Area. And her major focus, or one of her major focuses, is on translating science to non-scientists. Our second presenter from Cal-IPC is Jutta Berger, who is the Cal-IPC Science Director. Before coming to Cal-IPC in 2018, she was the Managing Director of the Science and Stewardship Department at the Irving Ranch Conservancy, which manages nearly 40,000 acres of open space in Orange County. Sounds like a big job. She grew up in Eastern Washington, has a BA from Washington State, and she says she began her lifelong interest in plants with a trip to a prairie preserve while in high school. I thought prairies were in the Midwest, but we have them too. Yes. MA recitational background. Her interests are understanding invasiveness from a biological, ecological, and evolutionary perspective. And she previously served at Cal as Cal-IPC's president and as a board secretary. So we're honored to have both of you with us, and I want to turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, David. That was thorough. Appreciate that introduction. And thank you so much for having us here today. We're really excited to be here to share some of the resources that Cal-IPC offers to the public. And hopefully you will walk away with some very useful tips and techniques and some tools in your back pocket. So I just first wanted to make sure that everybody could see this resources link in the chat. I don't know if that's showing up. I think we're discussing that you could see the chat.
Well, actually from Virginia.
Great. Thank you, Jutta. Jutta has put it in the chat again. Great. Perfect. And thank you for confirming, Robert. All right. Excellent. Thanks, folks. So this is a link to a number of the resources that we are going to be talking about in this presentation. So you don't need to worry about scribbling down pathways or URLs or anything like that. It's all there. The PDF has clickable links. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Great. So tips and tools for everyday use. So our agenda for today, we are going to introduce California Invasive Plant Council, as well as do a quick definition of different terms. We're going to talk about how invasive plants are managed on a state level. We're also going to talk about EDRR, which is Early Detection Rapid Response, what it is and how CNPS chapters can help. We're going to go over some tools and resources on the Cal-IPC website, and then we've got some final thoughts. So feel free to ask questions in the chat at any point. Jutta's going to be monitoring the chat, and we are also going to be taking some questions at the end. Whoops, I just somehow managed to stop sharing my screen. There we go. And I cannot see anybody when I'm sharing my screen, unfortunately. So Jutta will be the one to keep an eye on the chat. So who is Cal-IPC? Cal-IPC is a nonprofit that was established in 1992, and we have a staff of 6 full-time and 4 part-time employees, and we work on invasive plant issues all over the state. So as you can imagine, we stay very, very busy. Our mission is to protect California's lands and waters from ecologically damaging invasive plants through science, education, and policy. And Cal-IPC, we primarily focus on wildland weed management, not agricultural weed management. That is a totally different beast. There are obviously crossover species, but our focus is on weeds in wildlands. So given that we are a very small nonprofit, we are not the ones literally out in the world removing the weeds ourselves. What we do as an organization is help grease the wheels and smooth the path for other organizations around the state to do this type of on-the-ground work. And some of the ways that we do that are listed right here. We coordinate regional partnerships. That's a really big part of our work. Obviously, weeds do not recognize county lines. So it's really important that people are working together to manage areas and manage the invasive species in those areas. So one of our fortes is connecting groups of people, connecting people with different resources, connecting people with local experts. Another thing that we do is we help land managers prioritize resources for species management, because we are all painfully aware that there is always limited time, money, and personnel for things like this. So given that, it's really important to think about what species you're going to focus your precious resources on for the maximum benefits to the ecosystems that you're working on. Cal Weed Mapper is one of the tools that we're going to be going over today. That's a great resource for things like this. We also design science-based tools and projects to remove invasive plants. That is one of the major focuses of today's talk. We're going to be going over a lot of those tools today. We also advocate for sound public policy and funding. So a lot of the money that funds restoration projects comes from federal and state money, which means that that funding is competing with every other possible priority that the state has. So we make sure to work with policymakers in Sacramento and beyond to make sure that elected representatives understand the importance and relevance of invasive species management to both ecosystem health and the health of human communities. And we also do training. We train volunteers and professional land stewards. We do public trainings as well. That can look like what we're doing today, kind of these more informal trainings. It can also be more ongoing, hands-on trainings. And we also have our annual symposium, which is a really big part of what Cal-IPC does. Not only does that bring a lot of people together in one place, either virtually or physically, but it also is a great hub to kind of get your finger on the pulse of what's going on in California weed-wise. So the symposium, this is a little image for it. It's online this year, October 23rd to 25th. And this is a major event that we host yearly. Some of you might have been to this symposium before. So our theme for this year is getting ahead of the invasion curve. And we're going to be focusing on how to get ahead of this curve by really thinking about efforts in the early stages of invasion. So this means employing prevention strategies as well as early detection and rapid response, or EDRR. And, this is conceptually simple, but much more complex in practice. So speakers are going to be sharing their work at the local, regional, and statewide levels. So I really encourage you to check it out. It's going to be very accessible, all online. If you can't come to it on October 23rd through 25th, we will be recording the sessions and posting them on the website afterwards. Another thing that we're doing this year is in-person practitioner workshops. Online is great. In-person is also great for different reasons. So we're trying to get the best of both worlds for everybody. We're having 2 workshops, one in Southern California at Cal Poly Pomona on October 1st, one at CSU East Bay in Concord on November 15th. And the idea is that the content will be extremely similar at both of these workshops. So if you're in Northern California, so all of you would be able to come to the one in Concord and not feel like you're missing out by not being able to go to the one in Southern California at Cal Poly. So both of these workshops, we're going to have a number of different focuses. We're going to be talking about tools and techniques. We're going to be talking about restoration practices, how to manage volunteer programs, equity in field safety, and controlling regional target weeds. And there's more information about those different points of focus on the website. So I encourage you to check out the website if you are curious about it. And we do also have some student scholarships available as well. So spread the word about that or apply for those scholarships yourself. So how are Cal-IPC and CNPS connected? Well, certainly we share a larger mission to protect native environments, big part of what both our organizations do. Cal-IPC also points the public towards CNPS as a resource for using native plants when gardening, or to different chapters if people want to get involved with local volunteer opportunities. We get lots and lots of questions from people around the state. We have a help hotline, info@calipc.org. I'll talk about that a little later. And we get all kinds of questions. So we're often referring people to different CNPS chapters for regional specific information when it comes to invasive plant management or plants that are appropriate for different regions. Another huge thing is eyes on the ground. The CNPS chapters are key players in finding, identifying, and reporting these new populations or sightings of invasive plants. So that is crucial. We couldn't do this type of work without the knowledge of folks in CNPS and also the interest that you have in invasive plants and removing new populations. And CNPS chapters are also the ones that have the local work parties that literally get the work done. So we really appreciate all the work that CNPS does in the world. And Cal-IPC has also been talking about the new threats and issues around the state with the newly formed CNPS Invasive Plant Committee. So that is a new part of CNPS that we've been working with. What's in a name? I'm sure many of you are already familiar with these terms, but I'm just going to do a very brief overview of the definitions so we're all on the same page, and also so everybody knows how Cal-IPC defines these different terms. So invasive plants like this English ivy crawling all over the trees, invasive plants quickly reproduce and spread. They change habitats. They reduce the biodiversity in those habitats. Because they're reducing biodiversity, this can also cause extinctions, both locally and at a larger scale. It can increase fire hazards, and Cal-IPC defines invasive plants as non-native and introduced, in addition to being invasive. So that brings me to the next term. Well, what do we mean by introduced or non-native? So this rosemary here is a great example of an introduced plant. They are brought into an area through human activity. And crucially, introduced plants are not always invasive. Generally, what that means is they stay where they're planted. We don't generally go out into wildlands and see fields of rosemary taking over other plants and, causing all the issues that other invasive plants like that English ivy can cause. So non-native just means the opposite of an invasive plant. We use those two terms fairly interchangeably, non-native and introduced. Just means that it's not from the place it's been brought into. When we say native, like this oak tree, we mean it has evolved in an area over a long period of time. And in California, native often means plants and animals that were here before European arrival in around the 1500s-ish. And a weed is just a plant out of place. It can be a native plant, it can be an introduced plant, it can be an invasive plant. It's just a plant where we don't want that particular plant. All right, so how are invasive plants managed on a statewide level? Here's where it gets really interesting. There are essentially three main bodies that manage invasive plants statewide, and that is the California Department of Food and Agriculture, or CDFA. Those are the weed management areas, or WMAs, and the third is Cal-IPC. And so I'm going to go more into detail about these three different organizations and what exactly they do. So CDFA focuses on preventing or restricting the movement of pests and pathogens that affect commercial agriculture. That's the key thing, commercial agriculture. So they're less focused on plants that are affecting wildlands. A primary mandate of CDFA is to protect against the invasion of exotic pests and diseases. And they're fairly flexible in how they do this. So say CDFA gets a call about something, they get a tip in the pest hotline, they'll look into it and try to reduce the flow of it through commerce. And they do this, one of the ways they do this is through the various checkpoints at the state border. So if you've been coming into California, gone through one of those agricultural checkpoints, what they're looking for there are pathogens, fruit, other live materials. They're essentially looking for any items that have a quarantine on them. Citrus is generally something that you cannot bring into the state. They will likely confiscate it at these checkpoints. And what they're looking for really depends on what and where the most recent pest is, or where it's been reported. And CDFA is involved in a whole host of programs to increase education and awareness around invasive species in general, not just plants, but any type of invasive organism. So, for example, their initiative, the Buy It Where You Burn It, a program that they have for firewood. So, you don't want to move firewood from one part of the state to the other because you could be moving invasive fungus, invasive insects, things like that. So there's a big public campaign around not moving firewood. So that's a CDFA initiative. So that brings me to the second point. There is unfortunately not much enforcement for these things. A lot of the action is voluntary. Buy It Where You Burn It is a great example. It is not illegal to move firewood around the state. It's just a really bad idea. And so a lot of that public education is trying to, increase people's literacy around why these things matter and why they should take voluntary action to not do those things. Another example is invasive ornamentals being sold in nurseries. It's really, really common to see Scotch broom and English ivy being sold at Home Depot nurseries. That is perfectly legal. Is it a terrible idea? Yes. But unfortunately, there's no enforcement around that. So nurseries like Home Depot would need to remove those plants voluntarily. Another thing that CDFA does is they provide local and regional funding if there's a need for action. And so CDFA will give injections of money to the weed management areas if there's funding available, things like that. They can fund things as the need arises. The public can report things through the pest hotline and local agricultural commissioner. And that pest hotline number is all over the CDFA website. We're going to actually look at it in just a second. And then there's also the encyclopedia on the CDFA website. So these are weeds that are on the list of plants that are a risk to agriculture. And there's A, B, and C ratings. And there's also the California Noxious Weeds list. So we're going to take a look at that real quick. Again, this link is on your resource page. Here we go, CDFA Noxious Weeds. And remember, these are noxious weeds for agricultural settings. So there's the pest hotline. And if we just scroll down here, we'll see the California Noxious Weeds list. And before I click on that, I just want to quickly show you this, the weed ratings definitions. So A, B, and C ratings are the ones that we most pay attention to. A, for example, a pest of known economic or environmental detriment and is either not known to be established in California or it is present in a limited distribution that allows for the possibility of eradication or successful containment, etc. So A's are the ones to really keep an eye out because they're not here and we don't want them to be here. And then, B, a pest of known economic or environmental detriment, if it's present in California, of limited distribution. So I will leave you to read those on your own in more detail if you want to. And here is the list, just so you can take a look at what it looks like. And then you got to click again. And here it is. We have the A-rated weeds here, not in California. We don't want them to be. B-rated weeds in California, but limited distribution and, etc. So this is a really great resource if you're just looking for a quick reference of different agricultural pests to keep an eye on. Because, there's definitely crossover between agricultural pests and wildland pests. Oops. There we go. Okay, next we have the weed management areas. So the California WMA program is statewide. However, it is managed on a county level. So, like I said in the last slide, the WMAs are periodically funded by the state through CDFA, but unfortunately, this program was defunded for about a decade and did start getting some funding around 2020 that's slowly being distributed. So there is some funding out there. The WMAs in the counties are made up of various stakeholders. So everybody is focused on invasive plant control. And this means it's private landowners, it's county, state, federal, nonprofit organizations, all working together to make sure that everyone's pointed in the same direction. It's also a great way to share resources and information. So it's just a way for people to work together so the work isn't happening in separate silos and resources and energy isn't being wasted. And WMAs really focus on regional responses. So what's going on in the county? What is the primary target species in the county? There is one statewide meeting every year that Cal-IPC hosts. It's during the symposium usually. And so this year it is going to be October 23rd, 2024 from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. That's the first day of the symposium online. It is free to join. Anybody from the public can join. So if you're curious, I encourage you to check it out. And a little more information about WMAs can be found on the Cal-IPC website right here. If you're curious to watch previous WMA meetings, you can see them all right here, recordings from previous symposiums. And here is your WMA, the Marin-Sonoma WMA. So this information is a little bit out of date. Jutta is going to put the name and email of the current WMA contact for Marin-Sonoma, and that is Anna Dirksey. So if you've got questions about things WMA related, feel free to contact her. So there's some information down here. The meetings information is unfortunately not updated, but it is last I read, it was going to be Thursday, October 10th at 1 p.m. is the next Marin-Sonoma WMA meeting. So it's Thursday, October 10th at 1 p.m. And here's a little bit more information. There's all kinds of useful stuff here, local volunteering opportunities, different media. So again, just another place to go for more information about your particular area and your WMA. And here are a list of organizations that are involved in the WMA for Marin-Sonoma. And then finally, we have Cal-IPC. So like I mentioned before, Cal-IPC is a statewide hub. We connect people concerned about invasive plants to each other, and we also fill in gaps by providing the risk and invasiveness ratings for introduced plants in natural areas. And I will talk about that a little bit more later. We provide information on management in natural areas, including all kinds of resources that can help managers prioritize plants with their limited time and resources, like Cal Weed Mapper and our plant inventory. So the plant inventory is the go-to list for park managers. It is extensive. I'll be covering that in just a moment. There are resources about management techniques linked for each species listed. It's also very transparent. You can see the individuals that did the full assessment. You can see when it was done, if it's been updated. Another great resource on the inventory is there are references for all of the papers and original source material for where the information came from. So that's also a great way to dig into even more information about any plants that you're trying to manage. Another thing we do is develop best management practices for weed control. And so we have really been focusing on non-chemical controls in the past, and we are also including chemical controls. We've been doing a lot of work on that, and so you'll be seeing a lot more options for chemical controls popping up as well. So with that, I am going to start on the tools part of the presentation, the tools and resources on the website. So I am going to go over the Cal-IPC library and some things that you can find there. The plant inventory, Weed Cut, which is the weed control user tool, Cal Weed Mapper, which is how to find priority EDRR species in your area, and then also where to find the regional invasive plant EDRR target species as well. So first, just real quick, what exactly is EDRR? Like I said, it's early detection and rapid response. So this is oops, hang on, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. I am going to go into the library first, and I will get to the EDRR stuff in just a moment. All right, so here we are at Cal-IPC.org. So this is what you'll see if you go to our website. And if you are looking for our library, you can go to resources and then publication and video library. So if you scroll down a little, you'll find these training videos here, and there's all kinds of great stuff. I really want to call out all of the symposium videos. So since we have been recording the symposium, we have posted all the videos of people's presentations online, what's been discussed in the past. So there's all kinds of other training videos on prevention. There's a number of National Park Service training videos we did in partnership, different techniques like brush cutter, flaming, safe use of herbicides, different thistles around. There's also a section on mechanical control tools, non-chemical weed control, herbicide control. There's this great online training session for volunteers. This is kind of just general information around invasive plant biology, control methods, restoration strategies. So this could be useful if you're onboarding new folks. And then a stinkwort workshop. So lots of different things to check out there. I just wanted to call your attention to the video portion of the library. We also have a number of publications. So I go back here, and if you go to publications, you will find some fun stuff in here. So the best management practices for non-chemical weed controls is right here. This is a great resource. This is actually a downloadable PDF. It's about almost 300 pages. And this is not species specific. However, it is a one-stop shop for all of your non-chemical techniques. So if you want to know kind of, when you should be considering using grubbing or when you might consider using tarping, things like that, this is the focus of this particular book. So you can peruse it. It's a free download. You can download it right now if you want to. It's a great resource. So that is available through the publications page. And then I also wanted to show you down here in books, weed control in natural areas in the Western United States. So this is species specific. So there is 40 invasive species in California. And this will give you both chemical and non-chemical control techniques for each of these species. So it's wildly useful. It's great. Unfortunately, it is not available via PDF download, but many parts of this book are available in each of the plant profiles in the plant inventory. So I will explain that a little more in 1 second. But if you are a physical book kind of person, you can purchase a copy off the website. But the vast majority of the information in this book is available on the website for free under each of the plant profiles. And I'll show you where to find all of that information in just one moment. Okay, that brings me to the plant inventory. This is one of the major things that Cal-IPC has done. The plant inventory you can find under here, and it kind of manifests in 3 different ways. There is plants A to Z. This is the fastest loading version. You click on it and the plants come up as thumbnails. We have plants in horticulture, which is a subsection of the inventory. And these are the plants that are specifically horticultural related. But all of these plants are also in the general inventory. And then this thing that's called the Cal-IPC inventory is a way that you can filter the inventory for different characteristics. This takes a while to load, as does plants in horticulture. So if you want to use one of those, you just got to be a little bit patient, wait for the page to load. If you want a more immediately loading page, you can hit plants A to Z, which I'm going to do right now. And I'll talk about horticulture and the other inventory in just a second. So here you go. This is plants inventory. This is the entire plant inventory in thumbnail form. And if you want to search for a particular plant, You can do, I've got a Mac, so I use Command F, and then let's look up spotted knapweed as an example. So here we go. If you go to spotted knapweed, this will take you to the plant profile page, and there is a ton of information about each species on these plant profiles. So you'll get a little bit of overview here, and then this is where you'll see the plant assessment form. So you can see the evaluators, all the people who were involved in rating this plant. You can see when it was evaluated. You can see if it was reevaluated. And then this is going to give you a lot of information about how the plant got the rating it did. And I'm not going to go too into this, but one thing I did want to point out is that the resources for where all this information came from is listed under each of these sections. So if you want to really do a deep dive into different plants, this is a great, great place to look up different scientific papers. Species ID card is often included in most of these species. So this is great for volunteer days, or if you just want some quick pocket information, it's got some ID pictures of the plant, and then the other side shows you about how big it is, a little description, how you can quickly get rid of it in the best way. So just some quick thumbnail information of the plant. And here are the weed management notes. This is where you get the information from the Weed Control for Natural Areas book. So this is, if you buy that book, then this is what you're going to see inside the book. So you're going to get an overview of the plant with some natural history, and then you get lots and lots of great information about non-chemical control techniques and how well they work, and also chemical control techniques and how well they work. So you'll get lots of great details around that. That is a big thing to keep in mind. Often when we get questions from the public about how to control different plants in their backyards or on land that they own, we will point them towards the management notes section of whatever species they're trying to control. And then you'll have some other information down here about the plant as well. So loads and loads of info about each species on each plant profile page. So let's see, I wanted to show you this plants in horticulture. So here, these pages take longer to load because they're filterable, which can be really helpful. So this is just what the plants in horticulture page looks like. Again, if you click on any of these, you're going to get to that same plant profile page. This is a little bit different because this has a different risk assessment. But you know, that's going to get you to the same page. And then here's the inventory. This is fantastic because it's filterable by various things: Jepson region, habitat types, invasive or watch. So you can filter that way. And again, it's all listed. And if you want to download the inventory, this is where you can do it. So if you want an Excel file of all of these plants, then you can just click right there to get it. All right. So next, I wanted to check out Weed Cut. This is another great tool. So this is the Weed Control User Tool. And this right now focuses on non-chem techniques, but we are currently integrating chemical techniques into it, and it should be up and running with chemical techniques by the end of 2020, by the end of this year and beginning of next year. So look for more information on that. So this is going to give you an overview of all kinds of different techniques. So say you want to know a little more about, when you might want to use grubbing. So if you click on this, this is going to give you a great overview of that information. This is a little thumbnail summary, what it works on, the selectivity, the cost, how it's going to affect cultural resources, the risk of that, the safety risk, fire risk, environmental hazards, and those are all expanded upon in these sections down here. So you just click on that if you want to learn about, potential human hazards, etc. So another great feature of Weed Cut is you can filter by plant and site characteristics to try to figure out what techniques might be useful for your particular area that you're working on. So, say you can fill in various characteristics of the plant that you're considering, as well as various site characteristics of where you're working. So, I'll just, as an example, say maybe you're trying to eradicate some kind of annual grass, and maybe your site, the more you can click, the better as far as filling these in, but maybe your level of tolerable disturbance is fairly high. So you can handle some disturbance there. So this is going to give you excellent results. What's going to work the best? Good results, fair results, and poor results. So this is just a place to start as far as what might be better techniques to use given your species you're trying to manage and the site characteristics where you're working. You can also view management practices by select plant species. So we are also working on filling this out. Right now, there's only a handful, but we will be adding more very shortly. So end of this year / beginning of next year, you'll see a lot more species pop up. So for example, here we go. This is using, let's be clear. Here we go. So, oops. I did that wrong. Let's try that again. So yellow star thistle, you'll get good results cutting, fair results using these other techniques, etc. So, and biocontrol is in there as well, if you're curious about biocontrol. All right. So next up is Cal Weed Mapper. Oh, and I also just wanted to mention that, the purpose of Weed Cut is to help guide people in integrated pest management as part of providing this full plant management tool packet. And so that's one of the big reasons we're also including chemical techniques, is to just give people the best options given what they're trying to do and the resources that they have. Okay, and so here we go, Cal Weed Mapper. So this is pretty fun to play around with. All right, so you can search by region type. So let's look up weed management areas, and then let's look up Marin Sonoma. There we go. Okay, so this is the area that this region is going to be covering. And so you can check out this is just a really good way to get an idea of what you have locally around where you are, what weeds you might need to be careful of coming into your area. And it's a great way to see where all these plants have been mapped. And the mapping, so let's look up, actually, let's look up here. So let's look up spotted knapweed. Let's just keep picking on that weed. Here we go, spotted knapweed. There we go. Look at that. So you can click up here for the legend. So X means eradicated. So these are the areas where spotted knapweed has been eradicated. If you zoom out, you can see where spotted knapweed is in other parts of California. And so you can, figure out what's been going on based on the map, what legend. Is it spreading? Is it being managed and spreading, etc. And let's see here. Whoops. Here we go. So to understand what all of these different things mean, surveillance, eradication, etc., you can look here to see what the definitions are. So all of the plants on here and all of the sightings and recordings are from CalFlora, INAT, Herbarium Records. So they come from a number of different sources. Those are 3 of the big ones. And then if you're interested, you can also look up counties as well. And that'll give you information about your particular county. There you go. Surveillance. And if you click on any of these, it'll kind of give you that same information that we saw for spotted knapweed. All right. So those are some of the major tools on the website. There's all kinds of other stuff as well, but those are some big ones to play around with if you are unfamiliar with them. All right, so on to EDRR. I'm going to pass it over to Jutta in just a moment. But what is EDRR? It is early detection, rapid response, and it's a strategy that focuses on finding and removing new invasive species before they can establish and spread. And it relies on people being able to identify these new species and respond quickly. One of our colleagues, Claire at Cal-IPC, always talks about this great example of EDRR, which is murder hornets. During COVID, when we were all watching the news and everything like that, we heard about murder hornets, and I think it was up in Washington. And now we don't hear about them anymore. And one of the reasons is because that is a great example of EDRR. People saw that there was a problem, people were able to identify the species and respond quickly and eradicate this new invasive species before it became a big problem. So that is an example of like the power of EDRR and when it goes right. And there are also some regional invasive plant EDRR targets here. I will show you where to find this. So if we go back to, whoopsie, if we go back here, and if you go to the WMAs and regional partnerships, you can click right here, map and document with regional invasive EDRR targets. And this was updated in 2021. And if you go to page 6, this is where you will find the Bay Area EDRR targets. And this is also on your resource list. The link is called Regional Invasive Plant EDRR Targets. So you can find this. There's even a note that says Bay Area species are on page 6. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Jutta. And Jutta is going to tell us a little bit more about species in your area.
Constance, that was great. Yes, so this is a good introduction to what I'm going to be talking about now, which is specifically for Marin County. So you are probably all interested in hearing from us what the highest priority species are in Marin County. Like, oh, please tell us, please tell us. It's not as black and white as that. It's not as easy as that. And we're really glad that we had recently we're recently able to do this compilation that Constance just showed you for the regional priorities across the state, including the Bay Area, because we were able to sort of pull the ag commissioner's offices and the resource conservation districts and look for commonalities and look at the abundance of these different species, like wherever it was an invasive species that occurred in less than 10% of the USGS quads, and the ag commissioner was interested in it, or the RCD was interested in it, then bubbled them to the top. So this is our way of trying to help everybody, find some sense and find some direction in this mass of information and this onslaught of invasives that we have. So it does really depend on where you are specifically. It depends on like the species that are most important, depends on where you are specifically. It depends on how much of that species is out there. That's really important, whether it's an achievable goal or not. It depends on what resources you have to remove them. So Constance had mentioned Cal Weed Mapper. That's a great location to check for instance, for Marin County weeds. And it does get updated now, real time. It began. So before I talk about these 3 species that we selected, I'll just briefly mention that you can go back to that Cal Weed Mapper, and you can use a couple of other tools, and you can search for Marin County. You can search for Cal-IPC listed species, and for instance, Cal Weed Mapper is now showing when there are those new populations of those species that have shown up recently, from either entered in CalFlora or entered in through the herbarium, or entered as a record in the herbarium, or entered through iNaturalist. That's all like funneled and put into Cal Weed Mapper now on a regular basis. The data that we have for Cal Weed Mapper, and the core of it did come from a 2011 survey. So we're really excited that it is being updated real time now too. So that's great. So also that list that Constance showed you, the regional priorities for the WMAs and the commissioner offices. So what I'm showing here are 3 species that are selected from that Bay Area, whatever it was, page 6 on that document, the Bay Area priorities. And these are really species, it's not, the only species you should be worried about at all, by far. But there are 3 species that are not way up there in the invasion curve. They're really relevant to Marin County specifically, and either people can be working on them or people are working on them right now. So the first one I'm going to talk about here is European sea lavender. European sea lavender, Limonium duriosculum, unfortunately also has a lookalike sister species, which is Limonium ramosissimum, which is called Algerian sea lavender. Well, curiously, Marin County seems to have like a little bit more almost of the duriosculum species than the ramosissimum. But these are both like really attractive, cute little plants that love to populate the salt marsh. That is a problem because you all know, being a coastal county, how rare our salt marsh habitat is and how sensitive it is. So this gets right on in there, and it competes neck to neck with salt marsh bird beaks and all your other standard more common salt marsh plants of the upper salt marsh. So it's a problem species. It's a perennial. It's got a big fat taproot. It's a bear to get rid of because it has this mysterious, like, never-ending seed bank. You'd think in a watery environment like that seed would just go away after a while. No, it comes from mysterious locations, and it seems to be able to reside for a long time before germinating in appropriate conditions. So giving a little bit of a description of this species, of where it's at. So again, it's relatively recent in Marin County. It was first discovered, as far as I know, in 2007. And it's really quite broadly distributed around the Sausalito, Mill Valley, like that span, and over to Richardson Bay, that whole area, as well as more recently, and I don't know if anybody here might have more information about it, but I guess this year there is a population that was found in Bolinas Lagoon on the west side of the county. So that's a concern. And I do want to, though, say that there are people working very hard on this species, and one of them is right here in the audience today. It's Judy Stalker. So if you are at all interested and able to help with aluminum pulling, it's a wonderful activity. I have participated with Judy multiple times in the Sausalito salt marshes. Please, you can message her here, or you can, however, there are many ways of doing it. You can message her right here on this chat, or you can email us and we'll put you in contact with her. But we are, and she is really looking for volunteers every spring to help with removal of Limonium duriosculum, European sea lavender, and its near neighbor or near relative, Algerian sea lavender. The second species, Constance showed you a little bit of information on, and that's spotted knapweed. So spotted knapweed is, I would say, for locally, it's kind of an eradication success story. So there were a few instances of spotted knapweed in Marin County, and they have been eradicated. There are no that I know of, and that our data show us right now, but maybe you all know a little bit better, no extant records of spotted knapweed. This is also I didn't mention what the Limonium was. It's a Cal-IPC moderate listed species, and it's a CDF-B listed species. So spotted knapweed is a Cal-IPC high, and this is species of high threat, and a CDFA. It has a noxious weed status, but it doesn't yet have an A, B, or C rating. This is a biennial, so it dies after it blooms, usually the second year. It's an Eastern European origin. And it's really kind of trickling down from the Oregon, Washington area down into the northern counties of California. And as Constance was showing, in Sonoma County and in several of the other more northern counties of California, it has occurred. And there's also some more southerly counties that it has occurred. This is one where what you can really do here as a local chapter member is keep your eyes out. You can gain fame. You can be the first person, recently to have found spotted knotweed in Marin County. You can help push this species back onto the weed alerts list. If you find new records in Marin County, it is a very strong candidate to be one of our annual highlighted species in our symposium, which we call weed alerts. So this is, again, a real problem species, both for agricultural and for natural areas. Luckily, not yet a problem in Marin, but keep your eyes out. And then the third species, I bet if I look for a show of hands, which people can put up if they want to, of who's all familiar with Japanese knotweed, I would find a lot of folks here in the audience that are. It's a bear of a plant. This is a very pernicious perennial from East Asia, and it has first invaded Europe, and then it invaded the East Coast, and then it invaded the West Coast, and it was brought in each of those locations as an ornamental, a very pretty, very green, very nice shrubby plant that is very, very, very hard to get rid of. So it's also prioritized by both the Ag Commissioner's Office and the local Marin Sonoma WMA. And it is a Cal-IPC moderate status with alert, which means that it is spreading very quickly, and a CDFA A-rated species, which a CDFA A-rated rating is gives the state the authority to prohibit the sale of that species. So that's a good thing, the movement or the sale. Nonetheless, it's already out and it's in your canyons and it's very hard to get rid of. There's even a Marin knotweed action team that has formed over the last several years, specifically in Marin, because it is a hotspot for Japanese knotweed. And that's also, it was for a while led by Anna Dirksey. I don't know who's leading it right now, but it's led through the UCANR folks, and I can, after I get done here, I can try to find you the link and put that into the chat as well. So that's the Marin knotweed action team that does a lot of work on this. So please keep on the lookout for all of those species and make records of them. And this is where it's really good to mention what you guys can all do to help us better understand the distribution of all invasive plants, and especially of the ones that are new and are early detection rapid response targets. One of them is, well, you can go use INAT, you can use CalFlora. We tend to focus people on CalFlora because it's pretty well suited for weed records, and it is our direct funnel of information into our system, CalWeed Mapper, and what we also use to just directly from CalFlora to estimate distribution and abundance locally, so, and across the state. So record your observations in CalFlora. If you are if you are a weed warrior group and you're treating a population, record your treatment in there. You can't, a success is very difficult to prove if you don't have the data to prove it. So both for us and for you locally. And that's really what funders need in order to give money. They need those success stories. You can also, on CalFlora, you can mark the management status of a weed population. So whether if you're going to that population and you are removing it, maybe you don't even have the time to write a lot of detailed notes, you can change its status to managed. It's a very easy thing to do. And that helps inform us in CalWeed Mapper that somebody's actually looking at this plant. So lots of good training videos and other materials that are available. My colleague Nikki Valentine has spent a lot of time also helping with getting Ag Commissioners' offices and WMAs trained up on Cal-Flora. Next, please. And then Constance mentioned these regional priorities on our Bay Area priorities, specifically those 18 species that have been selected that seem to be prioritized by different counties at different levels. So here's just a brief graph of what we're looking at in terms of the populations and the amount of attention to them. And it's one of these, it's a sobering graph for the Bay in general. Let me walk you through it. First of all, these are all of the, 9 Bay counties, and the left axis, the bars, are the percent of the populations that have been visited. So unfortunately, there are no, of all of those priority species, no county has visited more than 25% of those populations of the high priority species. So there's a lot left to do there. However, Marin, congratulations, you are the county with the highest percentage to date. So good on you. The county that I live in, Contra Costa, is the worst at 0, I think, more or less. So also the dots are the number of existing populations. So you have slightly less than 30, about maybe 28 species, and 28 populations, and about 25% of those have been visited. At least are being recorded as being managed on Cal-Flora. So, and with that, I'm going to pass it back to Constance.
Yes, thank you. Excellent. I know we're running a little over. It's 8:31, but I've only got 2 more slides left, and I'll fly through them. Other useful resources, if you're not aware: Cal-Flora, iNaturalist. These are 2 that, as we've been saying, the data feeds into Cal Weed Mapper. PlantRight is a great resource if people are looking for landscaping plants. They offer, things like drought resistance or things that are really pretty, but also are not invasive. They're not necessarily all native, but it is a useful resource to know about. There's the California Invasive Plants Facebook page run by Barbara Cossey, and this can be a great place to get, invasive plant ID based on some photos, or just connect with a larger community. It's also a resource that you can tell people about if they're looking to learn a little more about invasive plants. And then, of course, there's UC Master Gardeners. We work with them a lot as well. They do lots and lots of public outreach around plants, gardening, and they end up doing a lot of stuff around invasive plants as well. And my final slide is just some thoughts about some takeaways. So one of the big things that CNPS can help do is to track EDRR populations, because you are all at the forefront of helping spot new invasive plants in the state. WMAs can be really, really powerful coalitions to advocate for funding and resources in your local area. And CNPS chapters have a long history of moving WMAs along and helping set priorities. There are lots and lots of resources available to help identify and manage invasive plants, both in urban home and garden settings or in wildlands. And the symposium and workshops are great places to learn more. And if you have comments or questions from the public and you think that we would be a good resource for them, please feel free to tell them to reach out to us. Our general info line is info@calipc.org. And please just remind them to tell us that you sent them, so we don't accidentally just send them right back to you. And so I hope this was a useful presentation and that you learned some new things. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, feel free to get in touch with us. And yeah, I will turn it back over to the meeting organizers. I just appreciate your time, and thanks for sticking with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Constance and Jutta. And it's now time to, it's open for questions. If somebody wants to raise their hand and unmute.
I think we only had one question and over the course of the meeting, and that did have to do with spotted knapweed and the use of glyphosate, of what are the constraints where it could and could not be used. I don't know if the speaker wanted to mention anything more about that, but can briefly answer that again live. I'll answer it just briefly live. I'll do that first live. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on your local constraints. Glyphosate is a very effective herbicide. It is a broad spectrum herbicide. It does not, it's not a pre-emergent. It doesn't kill seeds or seedlings. It kills plants that are actively growing. And if you use it in a very focused manner, you can very selectively kill species. That said, there's a lot of concern about glyphosate from various people. And so if you're in an area where the organization does not want to use glyphosate, well, that solved the problem for you. You don't use glyphosate. That's pretty much a lot of what's dictating where glyphosate is used these days, and obviously if you're using, you need to make sure that you have an aquatic permitted, if you're going to be in an aquatic near an aquatic environment, you have the correct adjuvant for that. So,
Clint, do you have a question?
You all mentioned about giving advice or going to an area and giving an assessment on how to treat a weed. How does that work?
you want me to take that, Constance, or shall?
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
I was copying some information from
No
the
problem. Good. Well, that is going back to Constance's introduction, which is what are we as an organization? We are really an information hub, and we are networking information. We do not pretend to be the the herbicide specialists, but we have a wonderful network of UC extension folks and practitioners. And we pretty much know across the state who's working on what, or who to ask someone else who's working on what. And that is such a valuable tool to give advice, because it's on the ground. It's really helpful. Now, if you're looking, are you looking for more specific, like pest control advisor recommendations, or not, or general non-chem and chem, or what? Did that answer your question?
I'm just interested in how to get rid of the rubus aromaticus.
Yes. Well, and I think that's where and I have it here also in hand, what Constance mentioned. When you're looking for a specific question for a specific species at this stage, until the weed cut version 2 is released at the end of this year, that book that I just showed you and that Constance mentioned is really excellent, because it will give you the best non-chemical techniques, or good effective non-chemical techniques and effective chemical techniques. And then talking with and then you need to also be clear about what your constraints are. Do you and that's where the weed cut tool is really helpful, because you can enter in the characteristics of that plant right now of rubus, like, oh, it's a shrubby, it's a woody shrub, oh, it's it's and the site characteristics, and it's in a rocky place, et cetera, et cetera. And with those characteristics, you will, if you enter those into weed cut, you will get an output in this case right now of all of the non-chemical techniques that would be effective. You can also specify, like, oh, I can tolerate disturbance, or oh my gosh, this is a really sensitive habitat, I cannot tolerate disturbance. That makes a big difference, because if you can tolerate all the disturbance in the world, the best thing to use is a bulldozer. But most of us don't want to use a bulldozer. And so I think weed cut is a great tool. Other local practitioners, your local land managers, are a great tool. This book is a great tool, and that's where we go.
Thank you very much.
There are some questions now in the chat. Lynn Barron asks, has anyone used 30% acetic acid as an herbicide?
Oh, I was just gonna say I don't know if you're familiar with the general percentages of acetic acid used, but it is a contact herbicide, not a systemic herbicide, meaning that it entirely depends on what type of plant you're trying to control and what the situation of your site is. You always kind of want to start from what your management goals are and what the plant is and what the site is versus what kind of herbicide do I want to use, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
And to follow up on that, typical acetic acid that you use that is also good at removing hard water and good at removing, you can feel its effects on your skin too, is between 3 and 5%. 30% acetic acid, you have to be really careful about. If it gets in your eyes, it could cause, some severe damage, some blindness. And so it will be probably a good contact herbicide. It is actually an herbicide that we have not chosen to consider as one of the organics because of its sort of lack of regulation that people, it's like, I'm going to take the kitchen, it's not really meant very well as an herbicide itself. People tend to sort of use it off shelf and off label a lot. So we are including an organic herbicide, suite of organic herbicides in our new weed cut tool, but acetic acid will be one of those.
Jim Normand asks, can you comment on the issue of climate change relative to invasive species adaptability locally?
Yeah, well, climate change, I think one of the characteristics that many invasive species has is phenotypic plasticity. That means they grow very well in a wide variety of environments. And unfortunately, that means that climate change favors, because of the much more erratic weather patterns that we have, they really do favor invasive species spreading. And that we can say that as in general, species by species, of course, it varies. But if you have a lot of new introductions and a lot of sudden change in the environment, you have a lot of locally adapted plants. It's the phenotypically plastic plant will easily have an edge. That said, in some environments, some invasive species may retract a little bit as well. So I think we look at it more as the unpredictable, the variability that we're concerned about.
Laura Armour asks, is there an effort to eradicate the pampas grass on the hillsides and on the way to Big Sur?
That is probably more of a Marin County question. I don't think I'm not aware for certain that there is an effort to eradicate, but I do know that the Big Sur, there's several groups along the coast of Marin County that have done a lot of work on pampas grass and on Jutta grass. So those are two species that are very difficult to eradicate at this stage, but controlling them is a big deal and a very important one because they're also a fire hazard, especially along roads.
That's all the questions in the chat right now. If anybody has a question they want to ask, feel free to unmute and ask it.
I also put our emails in the chat so you can copy those and feel free to get in touch with us if you think of anything after the program.
Okay. Well, Constance, this has really been great. It's so good to know about the tools that you are putting together and appreciate all the work that you're doing and how important it is. And it's invasive for any plant lover. Invasive plants is a subject we have to know about, even if sometimes reluctantly, and we should know a lot more about it. And we thank you for giving us, more information about how to tackle these difficult issues.
Yeah, just the last question. How do we, if we found a plant, how do we, if you're not sure about the ID, the identification of a plant, should we go ahead and use Carl Flora and note, or how
If you're
can you
not
help
sure
a citizen?
Mhm. If you're not sure about the ID, so on the resources page here, that the link to the PDF, you'll notice there's an other resources section. So there's the California Invasive Plants Facebook page. That's a great place to post your photos and try to get an some kind of ID there. You can also post it to iNaturalist, and the community there can help you ID it. So those would be kind of my easy go-tos. UC Davis also offers a service in the ANR, the Agriculture and Natural Resources, of plant identification. You can send them samples, and you get 5 free identifications per year. So that's kind of another endeavor as well. If you maybe INAT tells you one thing, and the Facebook page tells you another thing, then maybe you can get a final confirmation in person at UC Davis. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered my question. Yeah.
Maybe just a little follow-up on that is your local ag commissioner's office. If you think if you're tentatively have ID'd it as a weed and it's new to the area, you definitely want to take an herbarium sample, and you want to a sample, in good condition, press it and bring it to your ag commissioners, the Marin ag commissioner office. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it does get pipelined over to Genevieve Walden, who is the state curator, herbarium curator, and CDFA itself will not, cannot, does not evaluate plants if they do not have a specimen in hand. If you also do know that it is once you know that it is a new species to an area, please contact us as well, because we are that hub and we can provide that early warning to people and get that species also evaluated for our inventory as soon as possible.
And also taking pictures to post on, Facebook or INAT. Make sure you're taking multiple photos of the flower, close up of the leaves. Try to take at least like 3 to 5 pictures. More is great as well to post.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and we hope to see you next month.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate your time tonight.
Good night.
All right. Good night.
Change their budget.